Hey, welcome to the 99, a ministry of Crossroads Grace Community Church in Manteca, California. I'm your host, Heather Mahoney, and at the 99, our goal is to reach our ones far from God by equipping the 99 to follow Jesus more fully. Each week, we take time to lean into the weekend message at Crossroads by expanding further into the topic or concept in greater depth. We hope it challenges you and creates a hunger to dive into scriptures so you can know Jesus better. If you want to best engage with us, make sure to catch this weekend's message at crossroadsgrace.org/series or by downloading the Crossroads app. Hey, well, welcome back to the 99. I know we stopped in the middle last week, so I'm ready to jump right back in. Again, we have Brian with us here today, and we have a few more Q&A questions to answer, and these are some good ones, so let's pick right back up where we left off. Okay, you might have told us the answer to this one before, but I'm not recalling it. So what is your favorite Bible verse and why?
Well, that's like trying to choose your favorite kid, to be honest, because they're all good. But my favorite ministry verse is actually Amos chapter 7, starts in verse 14. It says, Amos answered Amaziah, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of sycamore fig trees. But the Lord took me from tending the flock and said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. Now, why do I like that? It's an obscure one because I just like obscure things, I guess. But Amos is historically known as this cranky prophet that if you read through the book of Amos, it's like he's calling out the church, he's calling out people for all this stuff. And what I love about it is that this guy named Amaziah comes up to him. He's like, dude, what's your deal? Like, why are you calling everybody out? Why are you being this bold prophet speaking these words from God and stuff? And what I love is, my paraphrase of that is, Amos is like, listen, dude, I grew up as a shepherd. I had a side sycamore fig tree gig for a while, but God called me out of that and said, you're supposed to go be a prophet. And that was my story. Like, I was in the business world, I was in the athletic world, and that was the track I was going on. And God got a hold of me and he said, I need you to be a pastor. And so for me, I resonate with that verse so much because it's like, hey, if you've got a problem with me and the role that I'm in or doing hey, you got to take it up with God because he's the one that called me from this to come do that. So I just love that. There's the fact that he's unapologetic about it. And he's like, I'm just going to go prophesy to my people Israel. I'm just doing what God's called me to do. It's one of my favorite verses. And so that's my ministry verse. What's yours? You got a ministry verse? You got a favorite one?
Mine, I would say, is more of like a life verse. So Psalm 27:13-14 says this, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. And I just think that verse became my verse just in a dark, hard time. And there's practical sides to it, which is what I needed at the moment. And it just reminded me there is goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and I just have to wait. And while the waiting might not look the way I would have chosen it, which would be a shorter waiting period, that God's still doing something. And so my role is to wait and to trust. So I liked that because it's continued to, it's never not applicable to me in any situation. So.
Well, and knowing you so well after almost a decade, right? As somebody that really likes things like to understand, like the black and white,
100%, right? And the clarity,
and that this darn life of ours doesn't necessarily always work out that way.
Not
I can
usually.
see where that verse would be just so helpful to you. Yeah,
very, very. Yeah, you nailed it.
I love it. Yeah.
This next question, I don't even know if I know the answer to this. So it's, have you ever experienced a crisis of faith, and how did it affect your ministry?
Yeah, I guess it would be interesting to know how this person wanted to qualify or quantify a crisis of faith, because I think that could look different for different people. I'm blanking on who actually said it, but the idea of a dark night of the soul where you just feel kind of distant from God, maybe potentially. So, or a crisis of faith where you're like, my faith says one thing and the culture says another thing, and like, how does those two things work together? So there's different ways that you could approach it. But as far as for me personally, I would say when my daughter was in the NICU, that probably was the hardest point in my life, I would say, as far as my understanding this good God that wants to give us good things, that gave us this beautiful little girl, and then trying to say, well, we could potentially lose her because of how sick she was. And so to say, okay, that's a bit of a crisis. I believe in this good God, and I believe, God, that you gave us this good kid, and now this beautiful girl is really, really sick. And so how do those two things mesh together? So that probably was probably the closest thing for a crisis of faith for me. And how did it affect my ministry? Well, in a beautiful way, it showed me what true ministry was about, in a way. Because going all the way back up to what do you do during the week when you're not preaching?
Yes.
Like, this was an example of what you do as a church when it's not Sunday. And to see my staff and to see the church that we were a part of just rally around us in this beautiful way that showed us what the church was about, it helped me not have as great a crisis, actually, because it actually showed God was in it, and I could see it through the hands and feet of other people, that they were loving us and caring for us. And so it affected my ministry in a sense that it actually made me more compassionate towards people. If you don't go through hard times, you can become callous towards what other people are going through, and you could just say, suck it up, buttercup, rub some dirt on it, get going. But if you actually can look into somebody's eyes and you understand that same place, you minister differently. I preach differently. I talk. And one of the reasons I love, if you ever come to Crossroads, you'll see I don't hide in a desk somewhere in the back between services. I'm everywhere. I just love talking with people. I love getting up to middle school. I love getting to the kids area. I love getting on my hands and knees and playing with babies, like whatever it is. Because that's where ministry is at. And in order to know what's happening in your congregation or in people's lives, you have to get to know people and talk to people. So that crisis of faith caused me to want to do that more, so I could learn more people's stories, so that it could affect my ministry more. But I've been very blessed that I haven't had a moment where I doubted God's existence or anything of that extreme nature. But I definitely had this kind of this tension, again, I think is the best word. God, I know you're good. I know you gave us this beautiful girl, and she's really, really sick. What do I do with that? Now, I'm blessed that my daughter came through that, and she's healthy, and now she's driving, and she's doing fine. But there was that moment. And you said it was hard for you to answer, but I mean, as you think about it, was there a moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, mentioning it before, but we adopted, and when we adopted, we had already had two biological kids that were 2 and 6. Yeah. And so then we brought a 9.5-year-old who just lived in 17 different homes before ours and just had a lot of hurt. And people out there maybe who have worked with kids who've experienced anything like that might understand what it was like, but I don't know that we understood what we were saying yes to. And so I was thinking, well, if I love our daughter long enough, she'll be like, they love me. I trust them. Yeah. And that's just not how it works. And so I went through this hard time where I don't think I doubted my faith, but I was upset with God that he was not like healing her mind and her brain and wiping it free of the memories of her experiences, because I knew he could, and he didn't choose to. Of course. And then maybe on the deeper level, going to a pastor for counseling helped me understand. He said, you're mad at God. And I said, I'm not mad at God. You don't get mad at God. And he said, I think you are. And I said, I don't think I am. And then he ended up being right, and I ended up being wrong. And I was upset. I got down to it because I realized he knew that if he asked us to adopt, I would do it. And it was so hard, and it was just hurting and breaking us. It was also hurting our daughter. It wasn't like one person was great and the others were having a hard time. So then I decided, I'm mad that you asked me to do this, because you knew if you asked me, I would say yes to you. And I don't like that you asked me to do this, because look at me now. And that's intense. And it ended up being some of the same of what you said. It helped me become more compassionate, more empathetic. It helped me to realize that what I was just seeing on the outside of somebody was probably not their whole story. It was just a little inkling into life for them. And I think it made me a better human. I don't like the way that it did, but I liked what it did for me to become a better caretaker, and for me to get to see people love us well. Yeah. You know, we didn't have a lot to give, but work at that time was actually kind of a sanctuary. Yeah. So it was this place where people did like me and weren't blowing up at me and that kind of thing. So getting to come do that was good for me at that time. And praise the Lord, he has always made sense to me. I haven't spent a time walking away. I've always known that he's real. I've always known that he's true. I didn't always feel like he was good, even though I knew that he was good. But our feelings aren't always accurate indicators of the truth. They're accurate indicators of how we're feeling at the moment. And so that's how I was feeling.
That's really rich. That's real. And I wish there was a way that we could get to the points that we were at now, minus the pain part. I mean, if we just
Yeah,
straight
it's not
up
how it
honest,
works.
you know, like I would love to have this feeling and have this empathy and have this connect, but it doesn't happen unless you actually go
True.
through really rough roads.
Yeah.
And I guess why Jesus would say that the wide is the road that leads to destruction, as narrow is the path to follow him. And I mean, if you're on a narrow path, you're going to probably trip and fall and skin your knees and, you know, hit some barbs along the way. And it's all part of that growth process, that sanctification, but it doesn't always feel good.
Yeah, you get purified closer to the fire, but the fire also is real hot and hurts. So
Indeed.
that fine tuning is, yeah.
Yeah, but look at us. Look how grown we are.
Look at us now, just middle-aged and chugging through life. Okay, 2 more questions, Brian. Next one. For me, I'm going to say this one hasn't changed for me, even though the question is today. But what is the most critical issue the church is facing today?
Oh, you answer first. You got this dialed up. I want to hear what you got.
I think it's the same thing as always. I think it's when we try to make less of Jesus and more of ourselves. So when we minimize what the Bible says because it's more convenient for our life, no matter for what reason, no matter for what cause, no matter for what heartache, no matter for what is cool now or whatever we're facing.
Right.
I don't think a phone is the core issue. You know, let's say for the middle schooler who's addicted to the technology.
Right.
I think it comes down to like, are we trusting that God is who he says he is, and are we going to make him big instead of making ourselves big in our life? To me, that's one of the core things that in all the test of time is always there. At least it's always been there since I've been aware of it, I think.
Yeah. Well, I would probably just tag, I mean, I agree with everything you say. For me, it's absolute truth. Like,
yes.
For me, it is, will the church truly lean into absolute truth, or will they waver to relative truth or my own truth or the truth of the political party, like that? And I sense that this is a crucial time for churches everywhere, Bible believing, Jesus loving churches everywhere. I just sense that there is a wave of people that are coming back to the church that have been gone for a while, or more encouraging to me even is the younger generation of people that are coming to church. And we have got to take advantage of that and honor that in a way that doesn't screw it up. Like, because what they're looking for is authenticity. They're looking for truth. So we had 327 people get baptized this last year. 137 of them, I believe, were next gen, right? I think if my numbers are right. And that should tell us something, that there is a youth revival that's coming. And what they don't, I just believe this, what they don't want is they don't want us to make up truth or make them feel comfortable about it or to somehow placate them. They want to know what's true.
Yes.
Because they've lived, and we've lived, and not all of our lives, but for a good chunk of our lives, that we have lived in this digital world that we can make it what we want. Now we have VR that'll create it as we want it. I saw this other day that you can, I think it's through the Google goggles or whatever they are, or the Apple goggles, whatever, that you can actually transform your house into a completely, whatever house that you want it to be, with like the snap of your fingers, and it changes everything in it so it looks beautiful. You could live in the worst place ever, but it transforms everything.
Wow.
And it looks the same. So we're starting to live in this alternative universe, and I think people are wanting to know what's real. And that's why as AI starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and people are able to, I don't know, automate everything. I just think that there's going to be so here's a small example. I think people are going to start to go back to cameras that have film on them instead of digital pictures. I think it's going to revert all the way back to that, because I think people want something that's real and they want something they have to wait for that's not perfect. I think people are slowly going to just want the gritty and the not as perfect and the not as, because with everything with AI, it's beautiful. It's perfect. It's always perfect. It's never. And so I bring that all the way back to the church, is that I think people are going to want to come in and not see some perfect AI generated pastor on the screen. I think they're going to want to see people that are broken and hurting, but they want the truth. I don't think they're going to want us to say, well, what would you like Jesus to look like? Okay.
Agreed.
Well, we'll figure that out for you. No problem. Well, how about you? All right. Well, we've got a Jesus for you. I think they want to know what truth is. And I'm not highly political by any stretch of the imagination, but you can see our country looking for at least something different by the way that we voted this time, that it seems as though there's a discontent with the status quo that's happening. Yeah. And there's something that's wanting to be different, a shift. And we would be remiss as a church, capital C church, if we miss that opportunity to show truth to them. Because I think those windows are going to get smaller and smaller, and there's going to be people that if we don't get it right, that they're just going to bail. And they may not come back. They just might not come back because we had our shot. So
I've been at Crossroads so long that we've had a bunch of maybe say slogans, bulletins over the years. Sure. And sometimes when I open up an older Bible, I'll find one in there. And I remember our tagline way back in the day. So I'm aging myself here, but it said, presenting ageless truth in a contemporary fashion. And so the core of Crossroads has always been, we don't want to change the truth. We're just like Jesus is using a parable, we're presenting it in a way to help you understand it, but the truth stays true.
Right. Well, yes. Yeah. And so back to our beach ball person or whatever, so you could still teach truth and have fun doing it. And you can have it in a way that people connect with it, and that you're not watering it down in any way, shape, or form. So I think absolute truth is going to be really important for us to, but one that is really close to it is I just am really fearful of spiritual obesity, that people that will consume all the spiritual calories, but they will not do anything with it. And they just continue to get fatter and fatter and fatter with all the information that they know, but there's no transformation that takes place. And there's no inspiration that's taking place in other people's lives or more anything. And I just think that is such a dangerous thing. And that's why we believe in Tag Your It, that we want people to go and do something with what God has called them to do. And so those two things, I think having absolute truth, the church needs to know that, but then they need to be prepared to activate people to do something with what they've been called to do. Because that's what the next generation, I believe, is wanting to do. They want to do something. They want to see something different as a result of what they're being a part of. If the church isn't that, they're going to find it somewhere else. They're going to do different things. But the church is so vital to that because Christ died for it. It's the bride of Christ. And we are responsible to make sure that people know.
I love that. It's the second half of our mission statement.
Hoorah.
And follow him fully. If we've discovered him, been led there, follow him fully. So sweet. Okay, this is our last question.
Okay.
It's a little easier one to answer. And I actually grew up in a church that we took communion on the first Sunday of every month. So I could see where this question is probably coming from. But why do we take communion every weekend at Crossroads? Yeah,
so it's a question I get quite a bit, and usually it's not in a negative way. It's just more like, hey, could you explain that to me? So I take this question not as like attacking, but more as curious. And it's a good question to ask. So the tension that people usually have with communion is the argument is if you do it too much, it loses its importance, and people feel like it's that we're just going through the motions is one. But then on the flip side is if you don't do it enough, are you like missing an opportunity for people to connect with who Jesus is? So I would say there's two reasons. One is very practical. If you look at statistics, people come to church 1.7 times a month at most, at best. I think it's even less now that with COVID, because now you can watch online and whatever, which is fine. But so what that tells me though is that if 1.7 times a month and you only do it once a quarter, there's a high probability that somebody might never take communion in decades because they just didn't get on the right rhythm and didn't know.
Kept missing it.
They just keep missing it. And so so one is practical, that I want everybody to experience and to understand the connection between communion and what Jesus did for us. So that's just a practical way. The second though is honestly I always want our services to come back to Jesus. Like I don't want them to be infomercials. I don't want them to be feel good. I want everything to funnel back to Christ because it should always be about Jesus. And knowing that you have this point that you're going to get to of communion, I'll use the word forces, but it encourages you, I would say, for me as a communicator, or for anybody that's up there, you got to get to Jesus because communion's coming. Make sure that you have this end point of Christ, and that everybody has this chance to be able to have a chance to think about their sins and think about what they're going through and bring those to Jesus. Like, I don't think we can do that enough. Biblically also, you could see where the first church, that they would meet weekly, they break bread in each other's homes. There's a consistency that people are doing it often and weekly. So it's not like we're just going against Scripture altogether. Acts 2:42 through 47, I think, would give you a good understanding where that's at. So one practical, 1.7 times a month. We don't want people to miss out on it. 2, we want to always bring it back to Jesus. And then the third one would be is Acts 2:42 through 47, walking us through what it looks like the first church, what they did, coming back to on a weekly basis. They would get together, break bread in each other's homes, and celebrate and listen to the disciples preach and take care of each other. So. So that's kind of the reason that we do communion every week at Crossroads.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you for that, and thanks for your time today.
So fun. This is really good.
Yeah, Preston will be joining me next week with another fun episode as we prepare for our second season. Again, that starts in January. If you have any questions or would like information referenced in today, go ahead and check out those show's notes. Other than that, we hope you have a wonderful week.
Guys, tag your it. Merry Christmas. Love you guys.
Thank you for joining us today for the 99 podcast. We hope to see you next weekend at Crossroads on campus or online for one of our 4 services. To view our service times, be sure to check out our website at crossroadsgrace.org.